The Old West was a wild and untamed frontier filled with daring outlaws, bold lawmen, and tales that have captured imaginations for generations. Many of these iconic figures didn't just live extraordinary lives. They met extraordinary ends as well. We'll explore the fascinating and sometimes unbelievable stories of 10 legendary personalities whose deaths were as remarkable as their adventures. So saddle up and get ready to dive into the captivating final chapters of these Old West legends. Wild Bill Hickock. James Butler Wild Bill Hickock was a legendary figure known for his skills as a gunfighter, scout, and lawman. Born on May 27, 1837 in Troy Grove, Illinois, Hickock became a folk hero due to his exploits in the American frontier. By 1876, Hickock had become a celebrated figure but was struggling with deteriorating eyesight and health issues, possibly glaucoma. He arrived in the gold mining town of Deadwood, South Dakota Territory, seeking fortune. Despite his fame, Hickock was financially strained and turned to gambling to make ends meet. On August 2, 1876, Hickock entered Nuttall and Mann's Saloon No. 10 for a game of poker. Habitually cautious, he preferred to sit with his back to the wall to monitor the room. However, the only available seat that day forced him to sit with his back to the door. When he asked another player, Charles Rich, to swap seats, Rich refused. Jack McCall, a drunken drifter whom Hickock had beaten in poker the previous day, entered the saloon. Humiliated by his losses and possibly fueled by alcohol or resentment, McCall approached Hickock from behind. Without warning, he drew a .45 caliber Colt revolver and shot Hickock in the back of the head at point-blank range. Hickock died instantly, his hand still clutching his cards. At the moment of his death, Hickock was holding a pair of black aces and a pair of black eights, along with an unknown fifth card. This hand became known as the dead man's hand, a symbol of bad luck. McCall attempted to flee but was quickly captured. He claimed he was avenging his brother's death at Hickock's hands, a story that was later proven false. Jesse James. Jesse Woodson James was born on September 5, 1847 in Clay County, Missouri. Along with his brother Frank, he became one of the most infamous outlaws in American history, leading the James Younger Gang in a spree of bank and train robberies. After the Civil War, where he fought as a Confederate guerrilla, Jesse James turned to a life of crime, justified by a personal vendetta against Union sympathizers and railroad companies. His gang became the stuff of legend, seen by some as Robin Hood figures, though there is little evidence they shared their loot with anyone outside the gang. By 1882, the James Gang was under immense pressure from law enforcement. Missouri Governor Thomas T. Crittenden was determined to capture Jesse James and offered substantial rewards. Robert Ford and his brother Charlie, both members of James's gang, secretly agreed to betray him in exchange for a pardon and the reward money. On April 3, 1882, Jesse James was at his home in St. Joseph, Missouri with his wife Z and their 2 children. The Ford brothers were also present, ostensibly planning a robbery. That morning, James read a newspaper article about his gang's recent activities, which made him uneasy. Noticing that a picture was dusty and crooked, he stood on a chair to adjust it. Seizing the moment when James was unarmed and vulnerable, Bob Ford drew his revolver, a .44 caliber Smith & Wesson, and shot James in the back of the head. The news of Jesse James's death shocked the nation. Instead of being hailed as heroes, the Ford brothers were denounced as cowards. The brothers attempted to collect the reward, but received only a fraction of the promised amount. They were arrested for murder, but quickly pardoned by Governor Crittenden, revealing the state's involvement in the assassination. John Wesley Hardin. John Wesley Hardin was born on May 26, 1853 in Bonham, Texas. He was named after the founder of the Methodist Church, reflecting his family's religious background. Despite this, Hardin became one of the most feared gunfighters in Texas history. Hardin killed his first man at the age of 15 and continued a spree of violence that made him a wanted man. He was known for his quick temper and deadly accuracy, allegedly killing over 40 men, though historical records confirm about 27. In 1878, Hardin was captured and convicted of killing Deputy Sheriff Charles Webb. Sentenced to 25 years, he studied law while in prison and was released in 1894 after serving 16 years. Upon release, Hardin passed the bar exam and began practicing law in Gonzales, Texas. However, he couldn't escape his violent past. He started an affair with the wife of one of his clients and hired lawman John Selman Sr. to intimidate her husband. On August 19, 1895, Hardin was playing dice at the Acme Saloon in El Paso. Earlier that day, he had a heated argument with Selman Jr., leading to tensions between Hardin and the Selman family. Around 11 p.m., John Selman Sr. entered the saloon. Witnesses differ on what transpired next. Some say Selman called out to Hardin. Others claim he simply walked up behind him. What is clear is that Selman shot Hardin in the back of the head without warning. As Hardin fell, Selman fired additional shots into his body. Selman was arrested and charged with murder. He claimed self-defense, stating that Hardin had threatened his life. Before the trial concluded, Selman was killed in a shootout with U.S. Marshal George Scarborough in 1896. Tom Horn. Thomas Horn Jr. was born on November 21, 1860 in Scotland County, Missouri. He was a respected scout, lawman, and detective, before becoming known as a hired gunman during the Wyoming cattle wars. Horn gained recognition for his tracking skills and served as a civilian scout for the U.S. Army during the Apache Wars. He later worked for the Pinkerton National Detective Agency, but left under unclear circumstances, possibly due to his involvement in extrajudicial killings. By the late 1890s, Horn was employed by cattle barons in Wyoming to eliminate rustlers and settle disputes over grazing land. His methods were ruthless, and he was suspected of several murders, though never convicted. On July 18, 1901, 14-year-old Willie Nickel was shot and killed near Iron Mountain, Wyoming. The boy's father, Kels Nickel, had been involved in disputes with neighboring ranchers. Suspicion quickly fell on Horn. Horn was arrested after allegedly confessing to the murder while intoxicated to Deputy Marshal Joe LaForce. The conversation was secretly recorded by court stenographer Charles A. Guernsey. Horn claimed he couldn't recall the confession and that it was misconstrued. Horn's trial began in October 1902. The prosecution's case hinged on the dubious confession and circumstantial evidence. Despite inconsistencies and questions about the legality of the confession, Horn was found guilty. On November 20, 1903, Horn was executed by hanging in Cheyenne, Wyoming. The gallows were mechanized, using a water system to trigger the trapdoor without a human hand, adding to the eerie nature of the execution. Many believed Horn was innocent, or that he was a scapegoat in a larger conflict between cattle barons and homesteaders. His execution remains a topic of debate among historians, with some arguing that he was unjustly convicted. Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. Robert Leroy Parker, Butch Cassidy, and Harry Alonzo Longabaugh, the Sundance Kid, were leaders of the Wild Bunch, a gang famous for their train and bank robberies in the late 1800s. By 1901, with pressure mounting from law enforcement and the Pinkerton Detective Agency, Cassidy and Sundance fled to South America with Sundance's companion, Etta Place. They settled in Argentina, attempting to start anew as ranchers. Despite initial attempts at legitimacy, they returned to robbery, targeting banks, trains, and mining companies in Argentina and Bolivia. Their activities drew the attention of local authorities and the Pinkertons. On November 3, 1908, near the small mining town of San Vicente, Bolivia, two masked men believed to be Cassidy and Sundance robbed a payroll courier, stealing the company's money. The Bolivian cavalry was alerted, and a search ensued. On November 6th, the soldiers tracked the outlaws to a rented house. A shootout lasted into the evening. According to reports, screams were heard, followed by 2 gunshots from inside the house. When the soldiers entered the next morning, they found 2 bodies with fatal bullet wounds, one to the forehead, the other to the temple. The ambiguity surrounding their deaths fueled speculation that they survived. Over the years, numerous stories and alleged sightings emerged. Family members and acquaintances claimed that Cassidy returned to the United States under an alias, living into old age. Similar tales surrounded Sundance. Billy the Kid. Henry McCarty, also known as William H. Bonney and famously as Billy the Kid, was born around 1859 in New York City. Orphaned at a young age, he moved west and became involved in petty theft, eventually escalating to more serious crimes. Billy the Kid became embroiled in the Lincoln County War in New Mexico, a violent feud between rival factions of businessmen and ranchers. Aligning with the Regulators, he sought vengeance for the murder of his friend and employer John Tunstall. Following the war, Billy continued a life of crime, becoming notorious for his daring escapes and alleged killings. He was captured and sentenced to hang for the murder of Sheriff William Brady, but escaped from jail in April 1881, killing 2 deputies in the process. Pat Garrett, a former friend turned sheriff, was relentless in his pursuit. On the night of July 14, 1881, acting on a tip, Garrett went to Fort Sumner, New Mexico, where Billy was believed to be hiding. Accounts vary, but the most accepted version is that Garrett waited in the darkened bedroom of Pete Maxwell, a mutual acquaintance. Billy entered the room reportedly in search of food or to speak with Maxwell. Sensing someone was present, he allegedly asked in Spanish, "¿Quién es?" "Who is it?" Recognizing his voice, Garrett fired his revolver twice. One bullet struck Billy just above the heart, killing him instantly at the age of 21. Billy the Kid became a symbol of the Wild West, young, reckless, and defiant. His life has been romanticized in literature, film, and music, portraying him as both a cold-blooded killer and a misunderstood outlaw. Sam Bass. Samuel Sam Bass was born on July 21, 1851 in Mitchell, Indiana. Orphaned at a young age, he moved to Texas seeking opportunity but turned to crime after failing to find steady work. Bass formed a gang and began robbing stagecoaches and trains. His most famous heist was the robbery of a Union Pacific train in Big Spring, Nebraska, in 1877, where the gang stole $60,000 in newly minted gold coins, the largest single robbery of the Union Pacific. In 1878, Bass planned to rob the Williamson County Bank in Round Rock, Texas. Unbeknownst to him, gang member Jim Murphy had become an informant for the Texas Rangers. On July 19, 1878, Bass and his gang arrived in Round Rock. While buying supplies, they were spotted by Deputy Sheriff A.W. Grimes, who approached them. Bass and his accomplices shot Grimes dead, triggering a gunfight with law enforcement. Bass was shot by Texas Rangers George Harold and Sergeant Richard Ware. Despite his wounds, he managed to escape into the brush. The next morning, Bass was found lying under a tree, severely wounded. Rangers attempted to interrogate him, but he refused to divulge information about his gang or crimes. He died on July 21, 1878, his 27th birthday. Bob Ford. Robert Newton Ford was born on January 31, 1862 in Ray County, Missouri. Initially a fervent admirer of Jesse James, Ford and his brother Charlie joined the James Gang in its later years. As law enforcement closed in, Governor Thomas T. Crittenden offered rewards for the capture or killing of the James brothers. The Ford brothers saw an opportunity. On April 3, 1882, Bob Ford shot Jesse James in the back of the head, while James adjusted a picture in his home. Instead of being hailed as heroes, the Ford brothers were widely condemned for the manner of the killing, seen as a treacherous act against a man who had trusted them. The phrase, "that dirty little coward," from popular ballads, encapsulated public sentiment. Bob Ford attempted to profit from his notoriety by reenacting the assassination on stage, but faced constant scorn and threats. He drifted west, eventually settling in Creede, Colorado, during a silver mining boom. On June 8, 1892, Edward Capehart O'Kelly entered Ford's tent saloon. Motivated by a desire for notoriety or perhaps revenge for James, O'Kelly approached Ford and said, "Hello, Bob," before firing both barrels of a shotgun into Ford's neck and chest. Ford died instantly at age 30. O'Kelly was convicted of murder and sentenced to life imprisonment. He was pardoned after serving 10 years and died in a shootout with police in Oklahoma City in 1904. Soapy Smith. Jefferson Randolph Soapy Smith II was born on November 2, 1860 in Coweta County, Georgia. A master of the short con, he led organized crime rings in Denver and later in Skagway, Alaska. Smith earned his nickname from a swindle involving bars of soap. He would wrap money around some bars, cover them with plain paper, mix them with unwrapped bars, and sell them at inflated prices, claiming buyers could win cash prizes. His associates ensured that only they won the money. During the Klondike Gold Rush, Smith moved to Skagway, establishing control over gambling, saloons, and various swindles. His influence grew, and he effectively ruled the town through corruption and intimidation. Tensions escalated when Smith's gang swindled a miner named John Douglas Stewart out of $2,600 worth of gold dust. The town formed a vigilance committee to address the lawlessness. On July 8, 1898, Smith confronted the committee at a meeting near the wharf. Drunk and armed with a Winchester rifle, he argued with Frank H. Reed, a city engineer and committee guard. Accounts vary, but during the heated exchange, both men drew their weapons. Smith shot Reed in the groin, while Reed fired back, hitting Smith in the heart. Smith died instantly, while Reed succumbed to his injuries 12 days later. Soapy Smith remains one of the most infamous con men of the Old West, and his death led to the collapse of his criminal empire. Law and order were gradually restored in Skagway. His elaborate funeral reflected his prominence, attended by friends and former associates. Bill Longley. William Preston Longley was born on October 6, 1851 in Austin County, Texas. Known for his violent temperament, he became one of the most feared gunfighters of his time. Longley began killing at a young age, often targeting African Americans and Union sympathizers during the Reconstruction era. He was notorious for his unpredictable nature and ruthlessness. After years on the run, Longley was captured in DeSoto Parish, Louisiana, in 1877. Extradited to Texas, he was tried for the murder of Wilson Anderson, a childhood friend he killed in 1875. On October 11, 1878, Longley was hanged in Giddings, Texas. He met his fate with a stoic demeanor, allegedly confessing to his crimes and seeking redemption. Stories circulated that Longley survived the hanging due to a poorly constructed scaffold or a stretched rope. Some tales claimed he was spirited away by relatives or bribed officials. However, contemporary newspaper accounts and official records confirm his execution and burial.